To remain updated with the latest business news, click on the bell icon.
Hello and welcome. I'm Siddharth Zarabi and you're watching Business Today. And with me today, one of the key officials involved in the preparation of budget 2022-23, Mr. Ajay Seth, the Secretary of Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Finance. Welcome to the show, Mr. Seth. Let me begin by asking you to explain to our viewers the key points as far as the macroeconomic logic of the budget is concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Siddharth. In terms of the macroeconomic numbers, the budget looks at the needs of the economy and realizing that the private investment is yet to reach to the pre-pandemic level, and there are still some gaps. They may take some time. At the same time, the consumption per se, the private consumption, is also a bit lower than what it was in a pre-pandemic. It was felt that there's a need for government to step up and come out with efforts to crowd in private investment. That's how the capital investment by Government of India, its agencies, as well as from the state governments, has been increased sharply by about 35%, 7.5 lakh crore. And if we count in what the monies are given to states for capital investment, another 3 lakh crores, 3.18, if I recall, the total investment is about 10.5 lakh more plus, and there's about 4.1% of GDP. The second, while doing so, we are fully conscious about the fiscal consolidation path, which Honorable Finance Minister had announced last year, and which is also the need of the economy. So a very credible path, we are fully committed for that, with reference to the revised estimates of this year of 6.9% of GDP coming down to 6.4%, about half percentage point reduction, and then reaching to 4.5 another 3 years thereafter.
Mr. Seth, I will try and address some of the questions that various entities have raised post the presentation of the budget. One of these questions is regarding the increase in overall expenditure. And it is said that it is only 4.6% in nominal terms compared to the revised estimates for the current year. How would you respond?
See, one should be conscious of this fact that the pandemic year, 2021, required a massive response from the government in a selected manner. And government was very judicious in providing a targeted support to those who needed it, and plus investment in health infrastructure and so on. And but that's not the normal fiscal stance year after year. And as a result, the fiscal deficit in that particular year was 9.2%, which is the function of both. One, revenue is not getting realized fully because of the pandemic impact, but at the same time, expenditure going up. For this year and the 21-22 build upon the same thing, bring it down. But the fiscal consolidation can happen only when the less productive expenditure, I'll say the less productive, doesn't mean that whatever is other expenditure is not productive, has to be allowed to grow less than the normal growth in the economy. Only then we get the fiscal math correct. So it has to be seen in that context.
One quick follow-up on this point. Has the expenditure been switched? Is that what you are saying, that you are moving away from certain kinds of expenditure which were required during the peak of the COVID pandemic to different areas to support longer-term growth?
See, we are taking the expenditure levels to several programs which were at the pre-pandemic level. In the sense, just to give you an example, that for example, the current year vaccination provision was 35,000 crore rupees. Now, almost 100% of the adult population, target population, already having got covered. By the March, we would have reached that level. Next year, we don't require that kind of investment to happen. So next year it provides for 5,000 crore, and of course, if more is required, will be provided for. So that's not provided for, it's not needed. Similar manner on food subsidy. This year, because of the second wave and the third wave, which is we are currently in, free ration over and above the normal scheme was provided. Now, that is something which is not expected, that we will have now, will reach, hopefully, the third wave will be the end of the year. So the next year, there's no provision for a free ration to be provided for, and so on. So this is basically getting into the business as usual, as far as business usual, meaning that normal year, not a pandemic year. So we are not treating 22-23 as a pandemic year. We are treating 22-23 is the year of nurturing growth in post-pandemic era.
Year of 2023 is nurturing growth in post-pandemic era, and therefore the next question, again, we've been trying to get feedback, and I'm taking that question from the feedback. One of these is that claims that the expenditure GDP ratio is declining to 15.3% from 17.8% in the pre-COVID year. Is that assessment correct?
We have to look at the totality of the aspect. So what the budget has tried to do is in terms of providing fully for on the expenditure side for the normal schemes, including the subsidy schemes, at the same time stepping up on the capital side. So I'm not sure what the numbers you are talking about, because even in the pre-pandemic 1920, the fiscal deficit was a reasonable number. Of course, that thereafter, that last year, a lot of transparency has been brought to the budget. So we should not, again, not compare it with a pandemic year. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, let's move on from questions which are more from an expenditure point of view to broader economic affairs matters. And the first question is, since you already spoke about it, the quality of the recovery. And there are two parts, Mr. Seth. First question is about the have-nots and the haves in what has happened in the past 2 years. And you have seen some amount of data, which is anecdotal, obviously. Is it true that whatever has happened in the economy, according to you, has supported the consolidation of those who were already well off versus those who do not have so many means?
While the impact of the pandemic, I am talking about the economic impact, has affected people with weaker capacities a lot more than people with better capacities in the economic sense. But at the same time, the hand-holding of them, providing the support to them continues. For example, the MSMEs, which is a very, very large avenue for employment, that continue to be supported for another year. And we expect that by another 1 year of hand-holding, then they can be on their own. That's the expectation at this point of time. And a similar manner, that those who had economically got a setback, helping them out with more job opportunities through the increased infrastructure spend. That's the idea, rather than a direct support. And I'll recall that when India adopted the support packages in terms of the Atmanirbhar Bharat packages, 4 and then the 5th one which came in last year, last June 21 it came in. It was a targeted support. Those who needed, they were provided the support, and those and the nature of the support also varied as we got response from the market or response from the people, that those are the sectors which can be on their own. Similar manner, providing support for the hospitality and related sectors. We know for sure that they have not reached to a pre-pandemic level. So again, that there's a support hand-holding for them continued with an increased support for them.
Therefore, while the fiscal side, whatever you have done, and perhaps it is the best in the current circumstances, do you feel that there is some amount of work needed on the GST side and non-budgetary side to further help MSMEs? Because many MSMEs continue to talk about matters, about certain difficulties, costs, electricity costs. You know all of that. Is there scope in the days, weeks, and months ahead?
Mrs. Siddharth, as we are all aware, that GST-related changes are no longer a budget subject. That goes into the GST Council, that whatever rationalization, etc., is needed. And yes, that is a work in the making, and GST Council meets several times in a year and takes suitable decision. But on the overall, other than the GST per se, the other issues which are there on cost of doing business, ease of doing business, this budget again looks at it on two aspects. One, that having done fair amount of work on reducing compliances, but that's not all what is needed. Indian economy requires a lot more efforts on reducing compliances, improve further ease of doing business on a wide spectrum of businesses and services. The second one, how do we can reduce or how we can improve the productivity into the economy, sector by sector. So what this budget signals is that a sector by sector approach, looking at that which are the elements which require productive improvement. And if those are the elements where government has a role to play, either a direct role or a facilitation role in an indirect manner, government plays that role to improve, help that particular segment improve productivity.
I want to just take one example, the aviation sector, which obviously has seen something very good in terms of the Air India sale. But even as the budget was coming, ATF prices have been hiked. A lot of people are saying that the management of oil prices, almost 3 months of no daily price changes despite crude going up significantly, and even the excise management, which is not a subject for perhaps this conversation, the overall oil account is a difficulty for doing business, Mr. Seth.
When we look at the overall taxation structure, and I'm sure that my colleague Mr. Tarun will be much better to respond to that. But overall perspective, I'd like to share with you that the taxation again has to be from the perspective of similar products. Of course, the ATF is different than what the petrol and diesel are. But which are the class of people which use it today? Aviation sector, a very large population, especially through Udan, etc., they use it. But there, the intermediation is needed. There's a large aviation industry. So what support is needed, that is altogether a different challenge to be brought in. So the effort of the government is where it impinges the common man directly, looked at much more carefully, much more on an immediate sense, rather than when there is a through the industry, that solution specific has to be found at an appropriate time.
I want to take a couple more of questions. One, from a broader strategy, this is 2 years of the pandemic behind us. Hopefully, we will now be completely out of it. Does this budget signal the belief that the government believes that the worst is behind us as far as the COVID-induced economic stress is concerned, number one? And if you can explain to our viewers in the simplest terms, what is the medium-term outlook leading up to 2025? You've given a fiscal deficit target for sure, but broadly in terms of the policy direction.
See, the policy direction, like for example, current year, we expect economy to grow about 9.2%. And next year, I'm aware of this fact, and even your viewers would be aware that economic survey had assumed 8.5%, whereas budget has taken a bit conservative number. But there's an absolute need, and this budget aims for that we continue to grow at a fairly high rate in the next couple of years, because the goal is to make up for the 2 years for which we went down 2021 as the economy went down. In the sense, there was a reduction in absolute terms, and thereafter to make up for that. So there's a need to grow, keep the growth rate high. And I'm fairly confident that over next 2 to 3 years, or say 3 years on, we will be in a position to keep the growth rate high.
My final question of the day to you, Mr. Seth, and this is to respond, ask you to respond to the criticism that while there is merit, obvious merit, and I personally believe there is merit to work on longer term, medium term efforts, the infrastructure push, the capex build up. Some people say that there are sections of the economy and the revival of consumption needed a more direct cash oriented strategy, which the government has stayed away from the beginning of the pandemic and even before, Mr. Seth. Is that criticism valid?
See that each option has its consequences, and we know for sure that a direct support has a much lesser multiplier effect than what it happens to the capital expenditure. Capital expenditure obviously has a much stronger and much more lasting multiplier effect, and not just for the year when the investment happens. It increases the total productive capacity of the economy. So the investment route, when a direct support was needed, that was provided in those years. And considering that the assumption is that we have seen the worst of or the most of the pandemic, and now we are entering into a post-pandemic area, and several informed people are now talking about this getting into an endemic area, not a pandemic anymore. So the idea is to invest in areas or take the government expenditure into a direction which helps in improving the overall productivity, as well as it helps in building that momentum and the opportunities for jobs.
Mr. Seth, one final question, and this is the target of 60 lakh jobs. I was personally struck by, and I think I may be right. You could tell our viewers that this is the first time that a formal jobs target has been mentioned in this manner in a budget. It's not part of budget documents because the budget is not meant for that, but at least as a statement of intent. What was the thinking behind putting a target like this, 60 lakhs, 5 years? Because it could come back to bite in some time, and people will say, oh, you said it in the budget, it is now official. How will this be achieved, if you could tell our viewers?
So you will recall there's this 13 sectors, and budget mentions the 14th sector because domestic production of drone was added later on. This was the 14th sector, just to clarify on 13 and 14. These sectors are selected with a lot of care and thought. One, the sectors which have a high employment possibility, at the same time, there's a large import content coming in. The second one, the sectors which have the requirement, where we have the potential, where we can not only meet our needs, but can also supply to the global demand which are there. So having selected them, this was an obvious thing, but when the sectors were planned, that kind of analysis was done, but it has been crystallized during the course of getting into the nitty-gritty, because now what each sector has designed, the rules, etc., games of engagement, etc., is all well known. So this kind of exercise has been done. These are the likely numbers that over the next 5 years, these are kind of jobs which will get created.
Mr. Seth, I know there are many more questions, but the time for this conversation is limited. I'll thank you for taking out time and explaining some of the fine print, and I look forward to interacting with you again in the future. All the very best for the implementation of this budget.
Thank you very much.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.